And Jackie on Rodney's More FM, very pleased to be joined in studio by the legal team, Richard Worker, our resident lawyer. The legalteam.co.nz is their website, but if you've got any questions, you can give us an email at rodney@morefm.co.nz and we can put them directly to Richard like we are doing today. So, I'm going to a job interview, but I have a colourful, quotation marks past. What kinds of questions is my prospective employer not allowed to ask me? Oh my gosh.
Great question, because sometimes an employer might ask questions quite innocently that they shouldn't be asking, but they want to find out more information and they may not be entitled to. Basically, an employer is required to follow a fair process. They can't ask questions that discriminate against the applicant for a job that's based on prohibited grounds. Now, those prohibited grounds are things that might discriminate under the Human Rights Act. Examples of this might be your age, your race, your colour, your sexual orientation, political opinion, and mental health issues. There is, interestingly enough, what's called the Clean Slate Act, and that states that after 7 years, a number of convictions may be considered to be not expunged, but you don't have to admit to them, as it were, at an interview. And there are a number of exceptions to that. For example, if you have convictions that might impact on your driving, if it's a driver's role such as alcohol or something like that, the Clean Slate Act doesn't apply to convictions that where you've been imprisoned, and the Clean Slate Act may not apply to jobs that impact on things like a probation officer, for example, or a prison officer, the police. Then you have to admit all those questions. So just bear in mind that after 7 years, most convictions, so long as they weren't imprisonable, that you weren't imprisoned, I should say. They may have been imprisonable, but if you weren't imprisoned, then they do qualify under the Clean Slate Act. The employer has to act in good faith. The employer is able to conduct some tests so that they can require you, for use of alcohol and use of drugs and so on, but they have to get your consent to be able to do that. So they can also go and do a bit of a background check, but if a background check is such that it could impact on you, then the employer does have to get your permission to be able to do those. Of course, if you don't let him do those tests, then that may throw up some flags as well. So that's another question there. But it's really, they're entitled to do credit checks, look at your driving record, because if you're going for a driving type role, then they want to know that you've got a reasonably clean record on that you haven't been speeding incessantly or drunk driving, etc., etc. So it's just a question that the employer must be fair in those questions. You have to answer honestly, but just bear in mind that you do have the Clean Slate Act behind you in that situation.
It's amazing, isn't it? Because that is what we do with our keeping our is it like our tax records and all that kind of stuff, isn't it? It's
exactly so, and pretty topical at the moment with what IRD seem to be releasing some of those, but that's a different issue, obviously, and so on. However, if the employer doesn't ask you certain questions, you don't actually have to supply information that you're not being asked about. So you don't have to say, oh yes, I've been convicted of this or I've been convicted of that. You only have to answer honestly if you are asked those questions by the employer.